Now we are recording. Great. Okay, awesome. Thank you all for being here tonight. This is our first virtual Beers and Banter program, as many of you have probably guessed, and so we're still working through the kinks.
Try both of the links.
And I will say, while we can't be in the museum in person, to be surrounded by some of Grace Miller's important things, like her side saddle or the black coat that we often see her in the historic photos. I am excited that we are all able to come together this month and at least celebrate the 100-year anniversary of Jackson's all-woman town council.
I wonder how long she served as constable.
So before we get into the panel, I do just want to share a few quick photos and facts about the town council for those of you who don't know the story that well, or even if you do, I never get tired of it, so I'm gonna share it as much and as often as I can. And a few housekeeping things, which even for those who perhaps watch this later on, this will still be relevant. This is Beers and Banter. We're usually serving beer in the museum, which directly benefits the Historical Society and museum. Obviously, we're not doing that tonight, but we are providing some banter. So please consider making that $5 donation to the museum so we can keep putting on programs like this. And also, in terms of making this virtual and how we're shifting, how obviously our community, our world has been adapting. Another exciting thing that the Historical Society is working on is we actually received a small grant from the Wyoming Humanities Council to convert our special winter exhibit into a virtual experience. And that exhibit is called Mountains to Manuscripts, Women's Writing in Wyoming from 1900 to 1950. So it's a kind of focused look at 4 female authors that were sharing their stories at the beginning of the 20th century. And it's just really powerful to actually hear about that time from those first person voices. And then also, this is the year of the All-Women Town Council and women's suffrage. And so we've been trying to put on a lot of events that celebrate women's history. I know there are a lot of other things going on in the community that these panelists have all been a part of. And I know there are things planned for the next 6 months, so keep your eyes out for that. Okay, so I'll get into the fun history. So most of you, I think you can see my screen, hopefully. Recognize these ladies. On May 11th, 1920, the town of Jackson voted for an all-woman town council ticket. Grace Miller was elected mayor. Genevieve Van Vleck, May Deloney, Rose Crabtree, and Faustina Haight were elected as councilmen. Grace specifically beat out her opponent, Fred Lovejoy, with 56 votes to his 28. So she had widespread support here, which is really exciting. And when I talk about the women, I like to share, we have a great letter in the Historical Society archive from a friend of Grace's who was in California at the time. And he wrote her to talk about, to commend her for her victory. And he said, "I believe your little city has the distinction of being the first in the US to elect its city government of women. It not only shows the confidence placed in the intelligent women, but the progressive intelligence of its citizens. Hurrah for Jackson, Wyoming." So I always think that adds some color. I also always like to remind people that we were not the first all-female town council in the country. There were some other examples before us, but one notable thing about these women is that they also came into office and then appointed other women into important roles. So Marta Winger was clerk, Viola Lumbeck was treasurer, Edna Huff was health officer, and Pearl Williams was appointed as the marshal. So they pretty much had all municipal roles filled by women in 1920 here. In the first 6 months of these ladies being in office, they were known as the petticoat rulers. They were kind of recognized, what they're known for is first collecting overdue taxes. So they did that, and they were able to increase the town's bank from $200 to $2,000. They bought land and then established the Aspen Hill Cemetery. They completed road grading and improvements. They expanded electricity in the town, and they even passed an ordinance that made littering a misdemeanor. So they were really focused on cleaning this place up and making it a respectable Western town. And I just like to mention, you know, I said it's also the year of women's suffrage and the 19th Amendment, and it's just incredible that this country was just adopting the 19th Amendment that recognized women's inherent right to vote, while at the same time Jackson had already embraced women as political thinkers and leaders. And then finally, in 1922, Grace was interviewed and asked about her success in office. And she, when asked about it, you know, how did you guys do this? She just said, quote, "We simply tried to work together." So I think that's a meaningful quote that still applies today and is a nice piece of history that we can all kind of elevate and think about as an inspirational quote to work towards.
You know, there was another member there. Her name was Pearl Hupt, Pearl Williams Hupt. And she was the constable, and she maybe continued on being constable. I'm just asking my assistant to look it up.
Yeah, I think she only had a quick stint. She was there for a year or two. And I think she was only 20 years old.
She was 22.
Yeah, she was.
Yeah.
This little lady later moved to Cut Bank, Alaska, and she used to stay at the motel.
Yeah.
And she'd come, and she was a wonderful little lady. And I knew her well. I'd like to talk about these days.
Really? That's amazing, Clarene. So here are the women. I'm going to quickly go through. This is a photo of Grace Miller and her husband, Robert. I was going to try not to share the names of the husbands in here. This is Rose Crabtree, and a great photo of Edna Huff, the health officer on the left. And then this was Marta Winger. Actually, I got those wrong. This is Edna Huff, sorry, and this is Marta Winger with Dick Winger, who was the editor of the paper at the time. Okay. So now on to our panelists. For those who are listening, I know we had advertised that Jen Simon would be with us. Unfortunately, she is not able to moderate our panel tonight, so I'm going to be asking the questions, and then we'll turn it over to the audience. It looks like some attendees are starting to trickle in, so please, I believe you're able as an attendee to ask questions via chat. So send those in. I'm monitoring them, as well as another Historical Society staff member, Kirsten. So send those in and we'll get to them.
I turn my sound off.
Not if you're going to ask.
Okay, so we'll get started with the panelists. I always start off Beers and Banter with the panelists introducing themselves. And we start it by asking, who are you? Which I know all of you are recognizable in your own right. But who are you? When and why did you come to Jackson? And why did you decide to stay here? So, Clarene, do you want to start us off?
Sure. Well, my first husband was a school teacher, and he had a choice between going to Lead or Idaho. And what would I have done there? In Jackson Hole. But we were later divorced, but that's how I came to Jackson. And I didn't really have much college, but I had typing skills and some bookkeeping knowledge and things like that. So, you know, I went to work at Jackson Wilson High School. That's what it was then. It was just a stucco building right back of where the Antler is now. And anyway, I can tell you all the names of the people. I'm actually writing my history. Can you believe that?
Great.
That's what I'm doing with my time here. So, but anyway, somehow the Wirt Hotel was selling about then to Teton Motor Hotels Management Corp. And can you believe this? There was only Mr. Moody in town for an attorney. So they brought in a guy named Mr. Spaulding from Evanston, and they asked me to do the inventory and to type the contracts. Now today I can't even turn the computer on, so it's ludicrous. But that's how I had my introduction. And then there was a woman named Jo Heckert that was the bookkeeper, and she quit. And I did not know double entry books from heck. So I got a LaSalle accounting course, and that's how I learned with the aid of Ralph Gill, who was an accountant. And we managed along there till Teresa always had a sore throat. When Teresa was born, I had to carry her to babysitters. We lived up on the hill. The streets weren't plowed. We needed another all-woman council. It was slick. And anyway, Moy Nethercott walked into the Wirt Hotel where I was working. And he said, I'm going to put her on the block, meaning he was going to sell the original 12 old units in the lodge where the office is now. And I said, oh, let me try. And I've always told my daughter Sharice that she was the cause because she cried that morning. And so anyway, between my in-laws and what few dollars we'd saved on his teacher's salary, which was $5,000 a year, and my parents, that's how I got into the lodging business. 12 old cabins with 10 shower stalls and an old lodge. And I stayed here because I loved the business. I fell in love with the business while working at the Wirt Hotel. And I just continued on, and I'm certainly glad we didn't go to Lead or Idaho.
We are too, Clarene. Natalia, I'm just gonna go around. You're next.
Well, I was just going to yield my time so that we could hear more stories from Clarene, but I'll go quickly. I'm Natalia Macker, and I came here for the mountains and the theater, and stayed for the mountains and the theater and the people.
You're wonderful.
Sara.
Hi, thanks so much, Morgan. Great idea. And you are Grace under pressure, just like our all-women town council. Interestingly, I came here because my roommate, Michelle Rooks, is the great-granddaughter of Genevieve Van Vleck. And I was really delighted to stay because many years later, it would be very important for me to work with Morgan and others to ensure that the Genevieve block was preserved so that we could remove the red house from the corner because I'm afraid those walls could talk. That is where Michelle and I spent our first summer in Jackson, Wyoming, working in what is now Cafe Genevieve, which was Jedediah's original house of sourdough. Many of you remember that. I think all of us share the same story, you know, the beauty, just the incredible natural resources that are here brought us. Yeah, I stayed for the people, but I'm still here because there is a lot more I want to do. And it has to do with many things that inspire me that were done by the all-female town council, and every single woman on this. You know, it's so inspiring to see the faces. Each of you is someone I admire and someone I have partnered with to do something that is much more wonderful because you were leading it or part of it. And I really hope that it is the time for women to step into prominent leadership roles. I look at powerhouses like Morgan, and I think it's time. So you're going to hear a lot of sass from me tonight because I'm not running for anything, and I'm saying it's time for many of the skills that I'm seeing in you strong leaders to come to the forefront, to connect, and to lead.
Thanks, Sara. We're here. Leslie, do you want to share with us?
Sure. Well, I grew up on my family's dude ranch over in DuBois, and I became an environmentalist quite early because there was very extensive clear cutting going on at that time on the Wind River. My father had been a forest ranger before my folks were able to buy the ranch, and he became terribly concerned. There was one infamous 1,800-acre clear cut, and this high altitude lodgepole timber doesn't grow back fast. So that was my first involvement in caring about an issue. And it just snowballed from there. We used to come over to Jackson skiing all the time, and I knew a lot of the people over here. And later, I began coming over here in the 70s. There was a nascent environmental group that started here that they called ENACT. And Jake Kittle and Med Bennett and Keith Becker and Vince Lee and others were already way in the forefront, like eons ahead of other people in terms of environmental activism and concerns about wild country and wilderness and so forth. So I was very engaged in every environmental thing that happened in Wyoming for quite some time, and lobbied at the legislature in 1973 and 1975 when there was a group of us that we called ourselves the Citizens Lobby, and a whole bunch of young idealists who went down there. And during those years, we got the Environmental Quality Act passed, we got the Industrial Facilities Siting Act, unbelievably, we got a state land use plan act passed, although it never really came to fruition as much as it might have. But that was done in a very bipartisan way. And some of the best people that helped with those things were guys like Al Simpson and Tom Strook, who was an oil man in Casper, and as well as Warren Morton, and even Malcolm Wallop made a few good votes. And there was a great, a totally different way.
John Turner.
And John Turner, I must mention John Turner was also great. It was a very exciting time.
That's great, Leslie. Thanks. Hailey?
Hi, thanks for having me tonight and all of us. I'm Hailey Morton Levinson, and I came here when my parents moved here when I was 1. And they purchased the Sundance Inn from Homer Richards. And so I feel connected to Jackson's history in that sense. And I came back after college. Oh, hear a little baby crying. I came back because of the community and realizing, you know, how you can make a difference in a small town, and to be close to my family and raise my kids here.
Always comes back to the people. I think that's what I'm most here. Yeah. And shout out to Homer Richards, who was one of the co-founders of the Historical Society and Museum. That's awesome.
Yeah. If you look at the mural that is painted on the backside of the Wart shops, my family had that painted, and Homer is in it, handing out Tootsie Rolls, as he always did, to my sister in that photo. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Nice. Let's get into the next question, which Leslie started to answer with her experience, but I'd love to hear from you all about how you first got involved with government or politics. What inspired you to run or get engaged? Hailey, let's maybe go the opposite way.
We'll circle back around.
Yeah. And then we can just do popcorn, whatever makes sense, whenever you guys feel like.
Did we hear from
speak.
Natalia?
She was quick. She went.
Oh,
right
and
over.
actually, Natalia, do you
Yeah,
want to introduce the women behind you?
Oh, yes. I also have borrowed the All Women Town Council to keep me company while we are at home. Thank you, Morgan, and the Historical Society Museum. So I set them up for meetings where I want to not be alone. So here they are.
That's great.
It's awesome.
Sorry. Back to you.
Yes. So when I decided, when I moved back and then decided that I was going to stay in Jackson in 2010, I, started looking at different ways to be involved. Obviously, community service was a big part of my growing up here. My dad was in Rotary, and I kind of grew up going to Rotary. And so that was instilled in us. And I ended up thinking about the town council because a family friend said, hey, you have a degree in political science, you grew up here, and it needs some young people and it needs more women. And so I looked into it and decided to run in 2012, and what obviously was successful. And it's been 8 years and interesting, and I've been lucky to serve with Sara and work with all of the ladies on the call. And I'm really glad that I decided to run, because at the time, I wasn't against any of the counselors that were on there or the direction that they had been going. I just felt there was a need for a younger voice and more women.
I agree.
So, yeah. Still always.
Clarene, how did you get involved with politics?
Well,
businesswoman to
I
politician.
didn't like some of the things at the school. And so I actually ran for the town council. But then Felix Buckenroth decided to run, and he obviously won. Nobody knew me. I was only been here a couple of years. But then I got interested in the schools, and I ran for the school board. And that's where I really had an interest. And I loved my school board experience. It was the days when I thought they were just voting against each other. It just appeared to me, it's the days of Betty Lucas and Tony Wright and all these then later Robin Light, and wonderful Carolyn Houghton. And anyway, I was just spent several years on the school board. And then I didn't do anything. And then John Turner, bless his heart, was the senator for this and Sublette County. And he asked me to chair his campaign a couple of times. And I did. And then he started getting me, he wanted to get HL out. And I didn't want to get HL out particularly, but I was a political novice, as Leslie well knows. I didn't know anything. So anyway, eventually he kept writing my name in. He got enough votes you had to get 4 or 5. You didn't have to get anything much to get on the ballot. So they'd call and say, do you want to be on the ballot? And I said, heavens no. And so anyway, but eventually I was sick the night they had the Republican conference. And Grant said, well, Clarene said that she would probably run if HL was not running. And I didn't know that he climbed the ladder and didn't want to be running anymore. So I felt, and then I was really concerned because I was still running the businesses. And fortunately, my kids decided to come home. And that was the only way I was able to go to the legislature. Then I ran, and I ran against my good friend, Leslie. And for some reason, why did I win, Leslie? I don't know. It was because I was older than you. That's why.
No. You
But
had
we
to
ran the most. Well, I think that Leslie was the perfect candidate. She was so civil to me always. And even after, she was so civil to me, except that she instigated me running that real estate transfer tax, my first bill. Boy, did I fall on my head. But I kept trying that transfer bill because I still believe in it. And I believed in it then, and I do now. But that's how I got in politics.
Very neat. Anything to add, Leslie? I did not know
Yeah.
that history between you two.
Oh, it's very interesting.
Yeah.
After I had been a citizen lobbyist in 73, 75, and on some other brief forays down there just to make sure I knew what was going on, I worked for Governor Hirschler as his legislative liaison for 2 sessions. And that's where I really learned a lot. And I hate to say it, but 2 of the people that influenced me the most in my career, or whatever you might call it, that might be an exaggeration, but anyway, Ed Hirschler and Dave Friedenthal. And I'm sorry that neither of them was a woman. And one thing I learned from them was what it meant to be ruthless. I mean, they could both be incredibly ruthless when it had to be done. It was strong to watch. But after serving with Governor Hirschler's liaison, I ran for Secretary of State in 82. Is that right? 82. And I won a little over 46% statewide. And people assumed that I would run again next time when Thyra Thompson stepped down. But I chose not to. Hank and I were so happy in Jackson. He had his law practice going. My dear friend Kathy Carpin wanted to run for it very much, and she was a distinguished attorney who had been chief of staff for Tino Roncalio, our Democratic congressman of many years. So I did not run for that. But then I got appointed in 1984 as county commissioner. And that was messy because there were only 3 commissioners then, and there were 3 Democratic names given to Bob Lalonde and Peggy Fates, who were the 2 other commissioners, and they split on the vote. So when that happens, it goes to the judge, and Judge Rank selected me. So I served 1.5 years as an appointed county commissioner, and then 4 years as an elected county commissioner. And during that time, I think there were 3 other women in the County Commissioners Association at our statewide meetings. It was very lean, and it still is, as Natalia probably knows. But then after that, I was stupid enough to run for the House against Clarene.
I thought you'd win if it helps you, honey. I was surprised.
Clarene had much better connections in the business community, and I might say in the LDS community, and it was a strong Republican county at that time. But we were friends, and we treated each other with dignity and intelligence. I think we elevated the issues, and it was a grand experience, and I applauded her work for many years. What was it, 14 years after that, or 16?
14, and they were wonderful years. I mean, you know, I think that they were very growing years for me, and I hope I did some good. Okay.
You did.
That's what it's about.
Sara, when did you get involved with politics and why?
Well, I'm loving these stories because, like most people in Wyoming, and certainly all the people that are talking, and I bet most people who are listening, if you want to be involved in making a difference, there are so many ways to do that. And one of my earlier involvements was an appointment by then Governor Dave Friedenthal to the Environmental Quality Council. And I'm learning tonight that I would never have been appointed to that had Leslie not done her work for the EPA. I guess, you know, I have a couple of thoughts as I'm hearing these stories. One is there are so many ways to be involved, and elected office is one, and I am so glad I had that privilege. It was not my favorite experience other than the relationships that I forged. I had one campaign that was a wonderful experience like Clarene and Leslie's, and one that was not. For people whose stomachs sort of turn at the thought of running and campaigning and politicking, I would just say, especially if you are in an underrepresented category like women, that there are so many ways to lead. And we need voices running nonprofits like the Historical Society, and there's so much that's possible. So I think these stories are so invaluable because I'm learning what my, you know, just completely respected, amazing friends of all these years have done beyond what I know. And I hope that inspires people. I guess there's going to be a dog fight behind me in just a minute, by the way. So you guys we're all doing our best to make this drama primetime rated. I'll just finish with saying I accepted this invitation because I respect Morgan so much, but also all of you and your commitment to civility and to championing that. And I mean, really ferociously doing so. Because civility does not mean namby-pamby girl stuff. It does not mean that we are not steeped in our own values and really fighting for things that are important to us. It means that we have the capacity, the intelligence, and the balance to disagree forcefully with compassion and connection. And I hope that message continues to get repeated and repeated and repeated. Clarene and Leslie's stories so compelling in that way. I would bet both of you would say that you have gained more from each other and your friendship and watching each other succeed than you ever could have if you had demonized one another. And it's a really inspiring thing to watch. So I didn't have very many female mentors either, but I have you two, and you're solidifying why that is tonight. It's really, really inspiring, and I forget how hungry we are for examples like you're bringing.
I always like to bring up that it took Jackson a while to have another elected woman after the all-women town council. So there was that big gap when it's, you know, while we revere these women of 1920 and their mentors in certain ways, they're not your traditional mentor that you can think of as truly seeing someone actively doing something and representing what you could be. So yes, I agree. Natalia, how did you get involved with politics?
Thank you. When I was newly living here, I had the chance to be part of Leadership Jackson Hole. And in Leadership Jackson Hole, you go down to the legislature, and We visited. It was still in the Capitol before the renovation. And I very distinctly recall looking down, and there was a legislator with his cowboy boots up, his cowboy hat tilted over his face, and a half-eaten donut on the desk, snoozing is all I could guess what was happening. And I just remember having this moment of, oh, like, where are the women? Where are all the women? And not not having thought about it, not seeing myself represented in those individuals. And then I think I probably made the mistake of talking about that a lot, and then had people suggest that I run for office, which was something I had not considered doing previously. So made the decision to run for the state legislature. Did not win that race in 2014, but had the honor of being appointed about 8 months later to a vacancy on the county commission. And I'm really grateful that that happened, because I've ended up where I was supposed to be in terms of service and loving local government and loving all the things that we get to work on, and the relationships with commissioners from other parts of the state, and kind of the strong network that is really there, and being able to work with all different kinds of people. And ran for re-election in 2016. I'm up again this year. And I think one of the things that's probably also been impactful is when I was first on the county commission, between the county and the town, there were 5 women elected serving. So our boards were 5 and 5 when we met together. And the commission was 3 women and 2 men when I first started. And now that we are 1 and 1, you can notice the difference. Just I think in dynamics and in how you're able to be. But it has been interesting to sort of go kind of in the opposite direction, but feel very grateful to have had the chance to have relationships with other women that I was serving with and working with in that regard.
Any other women from history that you all look to as great role models or examples that inspire you every day, other than these 5 great ladies we've talked a lot about? Or I should be pointing to behind Natalia.
Well, this is one, and maybe Leslie knows more, but someone who I only recently learned about was Thyra Thompson, who is the Secretary of State, and would really love to know more. Like, I've done some of my own research, but would really love to know more about her, if anyone has stories, and her work, because I was so excited to learn about some of her history. I don't remember where I was that I first read something and then just started digging.
You know, she was one of the large reasons why I ran. She encouraged me to run, and Thyra was kind of a mentor of mine. And in later years, her hair was blue. Okay.
True that. That's absolutely the truth.
I think at the end, she served for 24 years, and I ran against her when she ran for her last term and nearly beat her. She had been outstanding for many years, but I think maybe she was there just a little bit too long at the end, and people were beginning to recognize that.
No, I couldn't agree more, Leslie.
Oh, good. I didn't want to offend you. But one of the people I have admired very much over the years was Kathy Carpin, who did run for Secretary of State in 88, Hank thinks. But she did win, and she was fabulous in that office and made Wyoming one of the most business-friendly states in the nation right away, with limited liability corporations and so forth. And she later ran for governor. And that's about when some of the worst stuff started happening. She was pilloried around the state as, quote, a friend of Bill. There was a picture of her standing by Bill Clinton, who was not well loved in Wyoming. And they just, she just got torn apart in that race. And I felt so bad for her because she was so smart. She's still practicing law in Cheyenne today. And she's capable of giving a speech that I think can make people respond, or to energize and make people believe what they care about and what they stand for, as well as anybody I've ever heard. It's too bad, really, that she got beat up that much in that race, and I adore her to this day.
You know what I'd like to say? You have to try. You know, I got defeated in my first race, you know, and when I tried to be on the school board. And you have to step out there knowing that you might have defeat. But if you don't try, you're not going to get anywhere. And
Right.
women need to step out and try for these offices. Do you know how many times I've been the only woman on a board? Many, many times. Do you know that I was on the business council for 12 years? First 6 years were Governor Geringer, and he was appointed mainly because of, I was a seated legislator, but I served on the first business council because of the tourism board autonomy and some of the things they're trying to achieve. But I'd been off a year, and it was a term limited situation, but only in Wyoming. Dave Friedenthal, who I dearly love, and Nancy. But anyway, Dave called me up and said, I won't say how the explicatives he used, but he said, basically, get down here. These guys don't know anything. We're just getting a bunch of teachers and a bunch of bankers. Get down here. So I went back and served another 6 years under a Democratic administration, and only in Wyoming would that happen.
I think the time I felt the least effective as a woman was the 8 years I served on the state's Water Development Commission. I was, I think, representing the public at large, but it was the good old boys of the ag world, pretty much. And they were irrigators, and they knew every creek and every water right. I thought I knew a little bit about it too, but
I think you did a good job.
I felt out of my element there probably a little bit more than I did on most other boards, although like you, I was on many where there weren't any other women. One of the best boards in the world was the board I just served on with Sara Flitner's mother. The Commission on Judicial Conduct and Ethics in this state is a wonderful thing that's required under our Constitution. And that actually is a board that judges the judges. And if there's a public concern about a judge, it's brought to that board. And it's a very confidential and demanding and legalistic kind of thing. But I saw such good justice and such unanimity among people from all of the 3 lawyers, 3 judges, and 6 lay people that serve on that. And 6 years, I've just finished 6 years with that. And it was remarkable, a great experience. There's so many boards and commissions that are women. We should be promoting our women on all of those boards, and we should get that list every year as it comes up and begin to think about which women need to go where.
Yeah. I want to answer the question I just saw in chat and follow on. Leslie, I totally agree. And, you know, for my beloved men who are watching in the equality state, this is about, we don't have equality. So, you know, the last time somebody did something great for women, I often joke was about 150 years ago. And I don't say that with bitterness, but I think it's something we should all pause and notice that it did take 70 years or whatever to vote a new mayor, a female mayor, and then another period of time. Neither of those women were reelected. So I'm going to look forward to changing the balance. I really look forward to supporting Natalia and Hailey. In a couple of weeks, I'm going to host 2 online fundraisers for women running for the legislature from different parties. I don't care about parties anymore. I care about intellect, I care about heart, and I care about intention. So again, I don't think it's fair to say that genders, you know, I get very nervous about categorizing skill sets and qualities by gender. I will say in my experience as a woman, serving with other incredibly talented women on lots of different capacities, that ability to stay connected while in dispute and stay civil while working through very thorny policy conundrums is really important. And I would argue in this time, it is the single most important factor there is. for that reason, I will be supporting any leader that has that capacity. And so far, you know, what I'm seeing is that it's more, I see it more with women leaders. Some of that might be that we are still working for balance, and those in classes that are more structurally oppressed is sort of a strong word, but what you see how I am in a Wyoming native, and I still can't own that it's not right that we don't have the balance we should have in the state of Wyoming. So yes, women are still part of a structurally biased class, oppressed class, as are many others. And we're learning a lot more about that. The last thing I want to say, I think there are incredible partners of all genders who are who are passionate, not along for the ride, but passionate about this conversation. So this isn't women who want to see change. This is leaders in our state and people who want to raise families here saying, we need more balance. And the mono perspective is not moving our state forward.
Very well said.
And so yes, to you on Chuck Harris, yeah, it's harder being a woman. Let's see, did you ever get a letter in the mail from somebody with a picture of you from the newspaper saying, you might want to rethink your hairstyle? I know a really good person who can cut your hair. Yeah, this from a bald guy. So just saying, there's some funny stories along the way.
Looking at Chuck's kind of second part of his question too leads into my next question of he's asking, what goals do you have for the future in Teton County and Wyoming? And one of my next questions was, what do you see as some of the biggest challenges facing legislators today? If you want to share, not to get too far into it, but I think it's just interesting, and I like to compare it to the women of 1920 who were focused on prohibiting littering and keeping cattle out of the town square. I think things have changed a little bit in Jackson, perhaps, but they've also stayed the same. Who knows? So if any of you want to share what you think those challenges are, what you see as priorities right now.
Well, of course, I think excuse me, I think balance is a big thing. And I think that more women should be in the legislature. You know that we have a rising star that I claim out of Jackson. You know, we used to have this high school internship program. And Affie Burnside, whose dad is, you know, dad and mom were straight Navajo. And she married a man named Dennis Ellis. But she's really a rising star. Just watch Affie. She gets things done. She gets things done for women. She's a beautiful woman. And she encourages other women. I think that, of course, we have the state budget in a heck of a hole because of all the problems that are being right now. But I think the balance is the big thing. They're not balanced. We need more women, and we need more coming together on issues. We need to have an issue-based legislature instead of having all this being Republican, Democrat, or go to heck, whatever it is. Leslie,
I
you focus
agree.
on the people.
Oh. I was going to echo Clarene and talk about the balance as well. I mean, obviously it's unbalanced now. And when I see the way we're moving forward and when we come out of, you know, this pandemic, having a more balanced discussion or balanced voices in our representative roles is really important. Obviously that may not change this year or in the next few years for having many more women in the legislature, but that is something that I think about and that stresses me out, because as we're making these decisions now and in the next few years that will really impact women and minorities more than anyone else, you know, I wish we had more of that balance in our government.
It is rather interesting if you look worldwide at the countries that are dealing with the pandemic the best. It seems to be in many cases it's the women-led countries. If you look at Germany or you look at New Zealand, or there's 3 or 4 others, I think, where the women leaders have really done a good job and been able to bring their people along in quite a united way. It's not easy, of course, and nobody probably, our country is so large and so diverse, it would be difficult for anybody, but some great women leaders worldwide stepping out and making a wonderful difference with these difficult times. Our whole state's going to change. I mean, we are so in trouble financially, and we've been trying to move toward, diversifying the economy for years, and it's never happened. But this tragedy and other aspects of society are going to force us to much more quickly than we would want. It's going to be ugly.
Something else I would add, and this may get to Ryan's question a little bit too, but that is really important to me, and I think our state needs to work on, and that is linked when we talk about making the equality state more equal, which is probably an overarching goal that I have, is thinking about the economic status of women and the linkages between economic status and political status and economic security, and what we can do to improve women's lives in Wyoming, and how we know that will help communities be stronger, and all of the issues that we're facing as a state overall. But knowing that those two are so closely linked when we think about how do we get more women serving in better balance in our elected offices, that the economic pieces, whether that's the gender pay gap, or access to affordable childcare, or jobs that pay more than the minimum wage. Speaking of childcare, you can go potty on your
cue.
He can go potty on his own. We'll find out. So yeah, I think that piece of it, because it's easy sometimes to talk about women's issues, and that women want to get in office and deal with women's issues, and personally, other than maybe the tampon tax, I'm not sure that there are women's issues that are women's. Like, the economy is not a woman's issue, that's everyone's issue. Education is everyone's issue. Women may bring a different lived experience and a different perspective, and so they may draw attention to issues that have largely been pushed to the side, probably because women were just figuring those other things out on their own and weren't asking for policy help on them, when there's policy help that could improve that and make opportunities accessible.
Well put.
Any other questions from the audience? I've kind of run through mine, and I know some attendees have chatted in questions, but please feel free to add them now if there's anyone who has other thoughts or want to hear more from these women. Until I see those, what about some positive trends that we see in Teton County in the state?
Something I will say, so when I first became a commissioner, about a month before I became a commissioner, I was appointed to a state board, the Land Quality Board, that's part of the DEQ, and went for a board meeting for that to Campbell County, and got to meet, as it turns out, some Campbell County commissioners. And I think I certainly had expectations for how people were going to treat me, and probably didn't do a great job of giving people the benefit of the doubt, and was very pleasantly surprised by the hospitality and the pride and the excitement over having a person from the other part of the state come over and want to learn about their community. And I think that is an asset that we have in Wyoming, all across our state, is that people are very proud of their communities. They want to share them, and that if we can break down some of those barriers and expectations and assumptions that we're making about each other and in other parts of the state, either because of our gender or because of our political party affiliation, that it was more easy to find common ground than I was expecting. in that new moment. And I think that's something I try to hold on to a lot when it does get tough, is that we have a lot of things in common, even though we have so many differences.
Great, thanks, Natalia. Any other thoughts or really positive experiences that have kept you going in this fighting for your beliefs and for our community and for the people of Wyoming?
Well, I see two very young women here, three, that are going to carry the ball forward. And I see you, Morgan, and I don't think I'm going to be running for anything anymore. Okay.
Very inspirational, though, Clarene.
I kind of knew when it was time to quit. I just kind of knew that I should. And, things began to bother me more. Controversy. That first year down there, it's a wonder I just didn't come home, because I thought it was so. I got there, I was the last representative elected from Teton County, as a county. And then we went into reapportionment that year. And no matter what we did, I had a bill that I liked. And I got called in by the leadership, and they said, that's a Democrat bill. And I said, I don't care. It's the right bill. And of course, you'd have to know my background. I came from a mixed family. Okay. So anyway.
Mixed politically, you mean?
I think Deemer True and Ron Michael, I didn't like my politics.
You just got to, Clarene, thinking about women's representation, and now the name for it is escaping me, but in Wyoming, when we switched our districts from where you could vote for multiple people and send multiple, you had multiple, I can't believe the name is escaping me, but we switched to kind of the single representation in the legislature, and that was one of the times when we saw fewer women getting elected. And I can't remember.
Are you talking about open primaries?
No, it was had to do with districting.
Okay.
We're just about to go into redistricting again, and that's so difficult. As one of the people in Wilson, we were disenfranchised for a decade, and we may be again. I mean, they took a big chunk of Wilson and threw it in with Star Valley.
And I didn't like that.
I know. I was mad at Grant Larson about that for years, but it wasn't exactly easy to apportion it so that there was a one man, one vote thing.
Right.
I
hope, and this is hopeful, I'm willing this to be hopeful, that with technology, it's so different now with social media and the internet than it was when we had our last redistricting fight. Sorry about the light, sorry about the car noise. So I will echo what Natalia said. You know what? I think politics are really, really tough. And I think the incivility and the lack of compassion at the highest levels is heartbreaking and damaging. When you go around the state of Wyoming, you will be welcomed no matter what party, no matter what gender. The people who are living their lives and running their businesses in tough country are welcoming. I've experienced the very same thing, Natalie, and I love that both you and Hailey are so involved in this state. I think it's critical. And as our funding gets cut and our local social service funding is cut, it's really important to have leaders like you who can make it known that Teton County can't fund everything on its own without the help of government. Yes, I'm plugging for these two women, I am. Mm-hmm. I think there's a lot of hopeful relationship building examples going on, which is why I'm always so moved when Leslie and Clarene, you keep showing up, because I don't care if you're going to run for something again or not. We need your support and your, bye honey. They grow up. He's really huge. He's potty trained, and they're still going to be coming in the door, and I love it. Have fun. There's just that's hopeful. It's really hopeful to me, and I hadn't thought of it until recently, how many women mentors I have now. And that wasn't true for me, and it sure as heck wasn't true for Leslie and Clarene. That's hopeful. and going to the ground where the people are wanting to solve problems and wanting Wyoming to succeed and thrive. They don't want cheating in redistricting. They don't want a lack of balance. Our families and our business owners and our nonprofit leaders, they want what I hear all of you saying you want, and what the comments coming through, you know. So that's exciting. Thank you for reminding me that there are some exciting, optimistic things. Who knew it would take a, you know, history discussion, forward looking and optimistic.
Pump for the future, yeah.
Yeah. You do so well, Morgan.
I'm participating in a panel here.
It is true. When in 2010, I ran for governor, and the reason was that I was the chair of the state Democratic Party at that time, and somebody had to run. We didn't want just, you know, some old barfly to be representing the Democratic Party, and I sort of had to step up and do it. 2010 was the worst possible year to do it as well. But I left, I filed half an hour before the filing deadline, not knowing that Pete Gosar was going to file 5 minutes later, and I wouldn't have had to do it. But God, it was wonderful. 6 months on the road, only home, I think, 2 nights during that whole time.
Wow.
And everywhere in the state that I went, I never really had anybody threaten me or scare me or be really mean to me. I had people say, you know, I wouldn't vote for you, you know, no matter what, but they were as nice as could be. It's still amazing that in 2010, 10 years ago, an old lady, and I wasn't that old then, I was 60 or 70, almost 70 then.
Super young for the record.
all over the state. And I didn't always have someone with me. There were most weeks, and my friends from all over the state came with me and drove for me and helped me. And I had various assistants that could travel, some and not some. And a lot of times I was by myself, and I was going everywhere, door to door, at every meeting, going to fairs and rodeos and riding risky horses and parades and so forth. I couldn't have been treated better. I love the people of Wyoming, and I think they're still the same for the most part.
That's great.
Yeah, that'd be helpful.
Some questions from the audience. I'll throw this one out. What do you find was the most interesting and or important legislation that you worked on either at the state or local level? It's always hard with most. I'm sure you've had a lot.
It's funny, but the human, you know, the things that we did for Medicaid match for traumatic brain injury and the free clinic legislation, and they were all bipartisan. Now, I chaired Travel, Recreation, Wildlife, and I got cultural resources added to my committee. They had no advocacy, and that really makes me happy to see it being used in the way it's used. And so I think that's important things that happened in my. It wasn't the Pipeline Authority, but I did have a wonderful friend named Sandra Meyer out of Evanston that carried that bill. She was the opposite party. And we had, but those bills were important. Of course, I got known as the liquor queen because I sponsored that in the hard times. We were talking about abortion, reapportionment stuff. I sponsored the brew pub bill. And because I saw it as wonderful economic development, and you know, before they couldn't manufacture and sell at the same location. So I was able to do the brew pub. I think I got all but one vote, but it was fun to do because I kept bringing things like the barking dog ordinance, but I never got anywhere with that. That's up to you, Natalia.
Is that because you heard my dog barking?
Lead by example.
Yeah, I didn't do too well with that either.
Clarene, I got to serve with Sandra Meyer on the Wyoming Association of Municipalities board when she was still on town council in Evanston.
She's
so I didn't know.
She's a powerhouse.
Totally. She was amazing. Still is.
Yeah. She carried that Pipeline Authority successfully. She's been on some committee, but she She was very good. I later chaired Minerals Business and Economic Development. When they called me and asked me to chair Minerals, I said, "You've got to be kidding." But, you know, it had also banking in it. And I had a lot of banking experience by then. So it worked and I had a good time. But there again, I got to be a chairman because I was in the majority party. And I got to be a chairman my second term. And I was always a chairman from there on. But it was many years before Rosie Berger, and you served with her on judicial board. But Rosie, it was years before they had another woman chairman in the Wyoming legislature, which is a shame.
It is.
Mhm.
Rosie's another dandy, wonderful legislator. I'm sorry she's not there now.
Yeah.
Oh, I'd like to hear from Hailey and Natalia about the issues within your elected positions where you feel like you really made a difference or have been very important to you, or you feel like you've made headway or brought something up to a level of importance.
Thank you, Leslie. I was thinking about it, you know, so much of town council in my years has been focused on land development. You know, we've been rezoning according to the comp plan since I got elected in 2012. And I think that, you know, serving with Sara shed a light on not having to, you know, you still focus on that, but how do we shift the town council to think about more of the human bills or the human sort of policy? And, you know, the anti-discrimination ordinance that Sara started and then we were able to finish was how we can make a difference in Teton County for that. You know, we've started a needs assessment and pushing that forward, which, you know, in like without Natalia and I would say it wouldn't be brought up at all. Going back to a previous question of, you know, do women gravitate, or do certain policies get placed on them? It bothers me that some of our fellow electeds are like, oh yeah, that's like Hailey and Natalia's thing because they have kids in childcare. We all should be caring about it because it affects all of our businesses, all of our lives, all of our families. And so that will be one thing that I definitely want to highlight, that it's not just a woman's issue, like Natalia was saying, it's all of our issues.
True.
Hailey brought up the one that I think we've started, and I think the timing couldn't have been more interesting because it was completed right before we entered. Now I have a cat making noise. Yeah. Right before we entered our health crisis, and the crisis that we're in has really demonstrated the weaknesses in our. It was referred to me recently as the childcare industry, which also made me really concerned because I don't perceive it as an industry. Like I don't perceive public education as an industry. But I think it will give us the report that was produced shed light on things that I was not expecting. And so I think it's, as we continue that initiative and start to address what it revealed, I'm excited to work on that. And I would say another area, I think this speaks to what Hailey was saying as well about focusing on the human, is when we adopted the Health in All Policies framework, which has not been as fully integrated into our policymaking, but is taking into consideration the human health components of of how we look at things and the decisions that we make, that I think will really provide some of that balance, so that it's built into our structure.
Great. I think we just have a few minutes left, and I think Sherry Smith submitted a nice question. I think it's Sherry Smith. Sherry, to wrap up on. Thinking about the future, it seems likely that our congressional delegation will consist of 2 women of the 3 positions, but what kind of specific things can be done to encourage women to vote for state and local positions?
I will start with that one. I saw
Yeah.
she meant to encourage women to run.
Yeah.
This is of extreme importance, I think, to many people around the state, because we cannot elect more women to office if they do not run for office, as Clarene said earlier. And so making those leaps happen. So there is a cross-partisan group of women who have started a PAC to help support women running for office, because we know fundraising is a big piece, and something that we've learned particularly has been women in primaries. And since there are, as Sherry indicated, many of the elections in our state happen in the primary in a lot of communities. And so finding ways to give women the training that they need, the support that they need to run, whether it's campaign infrastructure or financing infrastructure. Thank you, Sarah, for hosting fundraisers. There's a lot of research that indicates that when people write checks for women, they write them for half the amount that they would write for a male candidate, which literally means women have to work twice as hard to get the same amount of money. And part of that is just a perception of women's ability to win, and the fact that we don't see as many women in office. And so while we may like the idea, they're perhaps considered less viable from the beginning. And we know from everyone that's run a campaign that money is really important. So I think that is one thing that it is trying to do. I think groups like the Wyoming Women's Legislative Caucus that runs Leap into Leadership, and really helping women, it certainly tracks with my story, identify themselves as someone who could be an elected official. And when you can't necessarily see someone like you have to be encouraged. I think they say women have to be asked 6 times before they take it seriously. And that we have to start doing that work very intentionally to cultivate women so that they can be prepared. And it may take them longer to get their life prepared to serve in that capacity. And then they need a support network around them, because women candidates are treated differently when they run, and they need to have the people supporting them and helping them. And then when they're elected, they still need that help so that they can enact the policies that they ran for office to do. And that if they are the only woman in the room, they can feel confident in what they're doing. But I think there's so much opportunity in Wyoming, as we've talked about all the boards. There's so many roles that need to be filled. And so I think if we can get women to make that step or gain some of that experience on an appointed board or commission, it's really easy to get involved once you know what those opportunities are.
Isn't it difficult, though, to go out and support someone just because they're female that you know is going to vote against everything you care about? Isn't that hard?
I guess it is. I don't know that I would ask someone to vote for a woman just because she's a woman. I think we would want to know her lived experiences. And I'm certainly interested in women, regardless of their party affiliation, that have a track record of doing things like this and supporting other women, mentoring other women, taking a lesson from our foremothers, appointing women to positions within their government, and trying to make opportunities available that might not have been available, or take a risk that might not have been available because women aren't necessarily always having the same resume that a male candidate or a male applying for a position would have.
I agree. I have a completely different perspective on what you were saying earlier, Natalia, or I want to add to yours, I should say. But if I left the impression that, women at any cost was my approach, not at all. But I'm pretty bored with partisan divisions right now, mostly because in Wyoming, there's just no balance. So there's really not a lot of interesting conversation going on at all. So any kind of balance, and if it were the other way and it was all women and all Democrats, praise, let's hope for something like that. But that's a high-class problem we'll solve when we get there. I'm saying that tongue in cheek because the point I really want to make is I experienced this, and I bet every one of you did too. The weight of what you should do as a woman to overcome the kind of the bias in the system, how you should not want childcare and don't ask for more and comb your hair better and do more with less money. And, you know, look at what you all are doing with your families, even in this call tonight. And I guess what I want to say to ourselves and to anybody who happens to be listening, each of our family members, parents and children probably, I want each of us as voters to take a lot more responsibility. Like, not what should we do to make women more comfortable running, but what can I do to notice that there's not balance, that my elected offices, boards, commissions, public boards don't look like my community or my state, and I want that to, so what can I do? And where am I doing it? You know, there's this story that is like, there's a terrible car accident, and a parent and a child are raced to the hospital, and the son is on the table, 10 years old, fighting for his life, and the surgeon comes in and says, I can't operate on that boy, he's my son. Why would that be?
Because the mother's the doctor.
Good girl. And you know what? When somebody told me that story, I was like, let's see, is it a same-sex couple? I literally didn't come up with the answer that the surgeon is a woman.
I didn't either. I heard it before. I didn't get it either.
So that's on me too. It's not just on my husband and my sons and my brothers, and, you know, like, where am I doing that, and how can I bust through that and help the situation? Because I just think we put so much pressure on the people who are already fighting so hard to do better, by asking them to do more, when I want to ask, what can I do a little better, and what can I invite other people in my amazing community and state to do a little better too?
Well, I think I really appreciate that, because I think part of what I've discovered, and it's not a role that I was expecting necessarily to always be in, but what I think also the crisis that we're in has illuminated is that women, in particular, women with children, that we've just sort of figured out how to do everything and make it work, and we just do it, and we truck along, and we keep doing it, and we go about doing it, and we make it work. And that sometimes sort of illuminating that for other people, like what it takes to make it work. And I say that as someone who is has resources and is very privileged, and like, I can make it work, but my stressed out version isn't even in the vicinity of the stressed out version of a single low income mother. And so kind of demonstrating some of that, for example, taking my 4-month-old baby to a meeting with commissioners from around the state, and then getting to watch me deal with it while we're trying to have a meeting, because I'm still nursing, but I didn't want to miss the meeting because I was one of the few women in that position, and didn't want the women's experience to not be part of the discussion. And one of the things that came from that was several of my colleagues just mentioning, like, wow, like, you're working really hard to be here, like, thanks so much. And I think it illuminated for them just what other people go through in order to be present and speak and try to have a voice and to represent others. And so sometimes it is that just with like showing up and not like having the courage to not just put on a good face and like make it look easy, because it's not easy. And people are struggling, and people are struggling right now to keep it together. And that we have to be honest about what that looks like if we want to ultimately make the changes that could create more inclusive environments for other people to serve in public office.
Great. Well, thank you guys so much. This has been really exciting and really, to use a word of Sarah's, civil conversation that I just think has been really illuminating and inspiring, just like the women 100 years ago. And for those who are still on the call as attendees, thank you for bearing with us as we work through the tech issues. You guys figured it out, good job. And we are recording this, so we are going to be sending out the video tomorrow and posting it for those who weren't able to join the Zoom call, who are waiting for us on YouTube. I'm really sorry, but at least it's recorded. Yeah.
Can I thank you for this.
Thank you.
And to appear on this panel with these wonderful women, it gives me hope
Mhm.
and confidence. And I just really loved it. And thank you for the opportunity to appear with these fine women.
You're welcome,
Women of
Clarene. And
accomplishments, women of purpose,
Gracious.
Thank you.
relevant women.
Yeah.
Okay.
while I have you all on the phone, actually, or on the call, I want to take a photo of us all smiling at the camera. Okay.
It's better to do it this way than to have like the candid one where half of our faces look terrible.
I took one of those and I was like, ooh, I
I look
look.
better with glasses. I decided.
Yeah, I've done those.
I know my light is bad. If it's really bad and it'll ruin what you're trying to do, I'll go inside. I'll go inside. I want you to be happy. You did a lot of work.
It works. It's hard to see your face, but
Yeah.
people will recognize your profile, Sarah. Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3. Okay, I think I got it. Hold on.
Okay, cool.
You just look sad.
That's perfect. That's great. Okay, thank you all so much. Thank you for everyone tuning in.
Thank you.
Maybe there's a part 2 coming up on August
26th.
26th.
Tenacity.
Mhm.
Some women's equality propaganda plays.
Cool.
Yes, exciting stuff.
Awesome.
Okay.
Great.
Have a
Thanks,
good night,
ladies.
everyone.
Clarene, keep healing up. I'm going to wave at you when I drive by. So I'll probably stand out there and honk till you wave back.
Well, you can wave at me. And I'll wave at you. Okay.
Drive around in a Cadillac and wave at all of
I
us.
rely on you.
I tried that today because I was bored.
Yeah.
And that's how
Sounds
I got
good.
my red face. And Creed's, he might peel.
And goodbye, all. It's been really nice to be together.
To see you all.
Really
Yeah,
hot.
really nice. Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye, Hailey.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye. Whoa, man.